Rasulullah getting married. How did he get engaged? How did he propose? How did he see the girl? Did he like her or not? What were his conditions for marrying this girl? And another that proposed to him and he said no. 9 wives. With every wife there is a story. I'm not talking just about biographies of the mothers of the believers. No. I'm talking about men and women, Rasulullah and the women, and how they interacted with each other. How did Rasulullah deal with his wife when she became pregnant? Have we ever thought about what did Rasulullah do exactly inside the house? Did he do the hoovering? Did he clean the shoes? What did he do, for example, if he came home and did not find lunch ready? Did he clean the dishes? I'm asking. I don't have immediate answers. Although I know that once he came, entered the house and said, any food? They said no. And he said, okay, I'm fasting. Okay, no fight, nothing. I'm fasting. I'm sure that if we think about Islam in this kind of way, Islam will then become more relevant to people living not in a state of war, but in a state of peace. Not in the battlefield, but in a civil society. Do you understand what I'm getting at? I am saying we have to make the seerah extremely relevant to us. And because we are not living in a state of war, focusing on the battles alone is not appropriate, is lacking. It's insufficient. I'm not saying we should disregard it, because within battles there were ethics and morals that we have to learn during peace and during war. But what I'm saying is that we will have a lot more to benefit if we focus on the gaps between the battles. This is one idea. But there are other ideas. There are other aims and objectives. To introduce a new dimension to the seerah, or the life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which I said and explained now. Another aim is to introduce parents and potential parents to a wide range of ways and methods that the Prophet ﷺ employed with children to raise them properly and deal with their challenges. I was hesitant of telling you this, but because we love each other and we hope that we will get to know each other, I was hesitant because I don't think it's appropriate to talk about yourself a lot. But if there was any experience that I might share with you, it's the following. One of the things is that when I was about to get married, I went to the bookshops and bought all the books on marriage. All the books in Arabic. And sometimes in English. I read John Gary's Men Are From Mars and Women Are... And these kind of... it's entertaining. I read them. To understand, I don't have sisters, so to understand women, my future wife... So I read the books. And the best way, I tell you this as a teacher, the best way to learn is to teach. So when I was reading these books, I was offering myself to give the Jum'ah khutbahs in the mosques. So, brothers and sisters, today inshallah I'll talk to you about how Rasulullah dealt with his wives. And I gave this khutbah years ago in Cambridge and in Good Street, and people were going to stone me. How did Rasulullah deal with sexual desires? This is one of the sessions here. So, books on marriage. Then when my wife became pregnant, I began to read, but not a lot now. Now I began to buy the books on children for my wife rather than... I did my bit in the marriage books, but I continued to read the books on children. And I found this fascinating book which is called Al-Manhaj Al-Nabawi fi Tarbiyat Al-Atfal. The prophetic methodology in rearing and breeding and raising up children. Very small book, about 200 pages, small, like A5. And I want to tell you at the outset that this book fascinated me. And I read it once, and I talked about it to many people. I bought many copies, and I gave it to my wife to read. And I want to tell you that a lot of what will be said today is based on that book. But other books as well, internet sites, etc., etc. Why am I saying this? I am saying this to encourage you to read. If you are not married, read about marriage. I'm not saying that this will compensate the experience. She might not be the woman that you read about in the books. She might be more beautiful and more, mashallah, better than that. but you have to read. Reading is good. So read about, and if you are pregnant, read about children. Not just through the GP, the physical and the health and breastfeeding, etc. No, the development and the psychology. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to take you through some of the things that Rasulullah did with children. I will treat children as blocks, their personality as blocks. And Rasulullah was building, the builder was building the blocks, was building the emotional block, the spiritual block, the sexual block, the social block. And that's why I don't think that these children were confused. And in the final session, we will see those children when they grown up, when they became adults, when they became fathers, when they became grandfathers. Incidentally, I want to tell you something that is a defect or a weak point, a point of weakness in that course. And I must admit this as an academic. In PhD theses, they say to us in the Viva, identify points of weakness. And I'm honest in that. Actually, a point of weakness in the entire course is that there isn't too much focus on girls, female children, that is. But I will put this to the challenge to you as sisters and as brothers. We need to know about Aisha when she was young. Do you know that Aisha, when Rasulullah died, she was only 18? Teenager. Asma, her sister, and Fatima, and other. I focused on the boys. Lack of resources, nothing to do with sexism or gender preferences, etc. With all respect to our female children, they are our mothers, sisters, and wives. Number 4, I think I wanted to throw it to you to think about things rather than me doing the talking, to develop analytical skills through the prophetic examples introduced and think about the challenges involved. I'm saying this because you might find a story in the seerah, but you have to ask yourself, what is the essence of that story? What changes in what could be a constant and a variable? What could be a changeable number and a constant? Do I have to apply it like it is? Or I take the essence and in the modern age? These are the sort of questions that I put forward to you. And this is what I want you to develop throughout this course. This is your active and proactive role in the course. And my favorite thing as well, as a historian, as someone who's fascinated with biographies, I want to at least introduce you to those children. Familiarize you with those children. And you know, by the way, a lot of them. Hassan, Hussein, Anas ibn Malik, Abdullah ibn Umar, Ali ibn Abi. You know most of them. But you know them as great companions. You don't know them when they were children. You don't know them. So I'm going to introduce this dimension in their life to you, to humanize them, and to make them more familiar and more beloved to you, so that you can relate to them. And when you deal with your child, you say, "Oh, Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah have mercy on you. You remind me of that child," or that child reminds me of you on that event or in that incident. So these are the sort of aims that I hope this course will tackle. How am I going to approach this topic? Well, actually, I thought, like Harry Potter again, to make it like a narrative. Okay? What do you do in a narrative? In a narrative, at the outset, you introduce the audience, the reader, the listener, to your characters. So who are our characters? 2 characters. One is the Prophet ﷺ, children around the Prophet. And the second is the children. So this introduction is going to introduce you to the Prophet ﷺ. But I'm not going here to provide you with a biography of the Prophet ﷺ. I am only going to provide you with things that I believe had an impact on children. So that when we come and talk about verbal or non-verbal body language, you come and appreciate. Hence the talking about the eyes, the lips, and the touch, as will become clear in the following session. So I am holding the camera now. I'm going to introduce Rasulullah to you, and I'm going to think about you as children. So what are the things that children will be fascinated with to know about the Prophet ﷺ? Okay, let's be fair and begin with the name. The name is very long. But why don't you memorize it and think about memorize it? Or think about memorizing 2 or 3 of his names. Muhammad ibn Abdullah, ibn Abdul Muttalib, ibn Hashim, ibn Abd Manaf, ibn Qusay, ibn Kilab, ibn Murrah, ibn Ka'b, ibn Lu'ay, ibn Ghalib, ibn Fahr. Imagine, brothers and sisters, when you meet Rasulullah inshallah in Jannah and say, Ya Rasulullah, by the way, I know you by name, not just Muhammad. I know you till your grandfather. What sort of relationship will happen between you and him? He was born in 570 AC. Either, this is debated among the historians, either in August or in March. And he was made prophet and messenger at the age of 40. I think all what you need to know as far as our context now is concerned is that he remained in Mecca for 13 years. So from the age of 40 as prophet till 53. And then he remained in Medina for 10 years, from 53 till 63. Why is this significant? So that when I mention to you an encounter between a child in Mecca and Rasulullah, you know that Rasulullah was in his 40s and 50s. And then you can imagine what would be the situation where a 10-year-old boy is talking to someone who's 50. Or in Medina, when he is 53 to 63, when someone like Anas is speaking to Rasulullah, you can imagine a 10-year-old now speaking to someone who's 60. So we spoke about the name. We spoke about the date of birth. And the significance of the age. Let's talk about his appearance. And again, his appearance are in At-Tirmidhi. I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list. And Tirmidhi is translated into English. But I'm going to identify these things which are fascinating to children. What is fascinating to a child? The face. Have you ever come across a child that when he looks at a face he cries, and when he looks at another face he smiles, he or she? Yes, perhaps, but of course out of familiarity. But maybe the face has got something to do with it. Maybe when the face is comfortable to look at, the baby smiles. So I just want to say to you, in children terms, the face of Rasulullah was, I'm not going to say handsome and good looking. This is for the adults perhaps. But for the children it was comfortable to look at. It was gentle to look at. What is the proof? The proof is the hadith that is narrated by Al-Barra ibn Azib, where he was approached by a non-companion who never saw Rasulullah, and he's asking that companion and saying, أَكَانَ وَجْهُ الرَّسُولِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ مِثْلَ السَّيْفِ. Look, this is an impression of someone, I think, who shares our perception of Rasulullah or the companions. I bet that the perception that you have of Umar is someone who's grinning and someone who's just waiting to fight, to pick a fight. Maybe this is a perception of a gangster in Liverpool and East London, but this is not the perception of the companions. How do you, I ask you this question, how do you visualize Rasulullah? Someone who's a white beard and smiling, saying Salaam Alaikum. Well, that wasn't the face of the Prophet, I'll tell you that. But I assure you that the face of the Prophet ﷺ was comfortable to look at, based on that hadith where a man comes to Al-Barra ibn Azib and says, أَكَانَ وَجْهُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم مِثْلَ السَّيْفِ. Was the face of Rasulullah ﷺ, he's asking that companion because he hasn't seen him, that man. Was the face of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ like the sword? Sharp? Wanting to cut things? He said no. بَلْ كَانَ مِثْلَ الْقَمَرِ. No, he was like the moon.